Classes are amazing, don't get me wrong, and I want to give them a try, but at least in AHK, I haven't been noticing many reasons to use classes. For most things I need, I can just use functions. And as you can see, I have these prefixes to the names of my functions to basically group them together. And more importantly, to make it easier to search for the function when I type it in. Now, that might be already reason enough to use classes instead, because, well, it's not as janky. The reason why I didn't is I used to use a different extension for VS Code. It was actually just a V1 extension, AutoHotkey++, which I remade to work for V2. Still, I don't know JavaScript, I don't know how to make VS Code extensions, so it was kind of janky, and when you use the class, say Spotify, we're gonna get to that, it wouldn't show you the properties and methods of that class. Now it does. Here are the properties and methods overall of a class, and then go those that I made. And you won't see any methods or properties that are from a different class or just a function or whatever else. That's because the V2 extension actually works properly. The V1 extension didn't. And I had to essentially remember almost the exact name of every function. But if I could just say YouTube, not even fully, and here they are, better autocomplete, that's easier to use. So I stopped using classes because they were not helping me, and started using prefixes in my functions. That has worked greatly, and I mean, I have no issues with it. There's nothing like, damn, I wish this was there. Damn, I wish I could use that. No, I don't have that. So it's been kind of hard to implement classes into my project because I don't have a reason to. So I have been trying to look for opportunities where it would make sense to have a class. And now that the autocomplete works correctly, I don't have to use prefixes anymore. They look janky and kind of stupid. Like, I absolutely agree. And if I use a class instead, well, here they are. They are named like normal functions. The only thing is that I have to use the actual class name to call the function. So instead of Spotify, I would have Spotify, and see, I don't even have to write it all out. Autocomplete dot, and then here it is. It looks nicer. Autocomplete works for it. I have potentially more of a way to group those functions together and have them interact with information, because I often just make another function that returns and stores a value. In classes, you don't have to do that. So this is my first class coming back, and I already noticed something very, very important. I created this property WinTitle. In some of my functions, I use the WinTitle of the Spotify window, which is this. And I always write this out in the function. Now, I don't imagine that I'm going to change this, or that Spotify's WinTitle will ever change, but it might. And then when it does, or if it does, I have to go into the code, find where I actually type this out, and then change it on every occasion. That's very annoying. However, if every time that I use this WinTitle, I just use yeah, I just use Spotify.winTitle, and that's the same exact thing that I won't have to change. Better yet, if the winTitle is wrong, the only time where I'll actually see the error is when I try to use that function, and it's not even the error that pops up and lets me know. No, it will just not work, and I'll have no idea. But with this, if I say, if I renamed the winTitle property to something else, like just title, or any of that matter, I'll have a lot of runtime errors popping up telling me, yo, you fucked up, change this here, here, and here. Way easier to work with. So that's already huge. And now, in a couple of places, here, here, and somewhere else. Now I use the winTitle in one single variable. I don't have to worry about it. And yes, indeed, on a couple of occasions, I have changed how I name winTitles. Maybe one time it was just hkexa Windows Terminal.exe. But now it's a group because I add some but exclude others, for example. Maybe I removed the Visual Studio Code part of the winTitle. Maybe I changed my browser. Could very much be true. And so on. So there is a reason to potentially change winTitles. And now, when I go through refactoring pretty much my whole code base, more or less, some will still stay functions though, then all I have to do is Spotify.winTitle. Boom, I don't have to touch it any other time. This is the same reason that I have a paths class, which I showed you off in multiple of my videos. Because once I change the file path here, I won't have to change it again in any other place. All that matters is that I call this by the same keyword, which is quite a bit easier to search for. If I even change it, I don't have to. So I just change the path here. It changes throughout my whole project, which is why I really recommend having a path class. So nice for maintainability, because no longer do you want to move a file and think, holy shit, it's going to be so annoying having to change every place where I mentioned that path. Not needed anymore. Absolutely not. And there's an argument to be made about a working dir. Meaning your paths will be relative. Well, what if you move that folder that is working dir into some other place? Well, you can say, well, I don't have to. I can take that inability, but you don't have to. You really don't. Because even if you move that working dir folder, well, this will still work. Absolutely will, because I'm using absolute paths here. And they will work regardless. Though, true, if I'm on a different machine, a lot of this will break. On the other hand, if I use so many different paths, it's not like they're just gonna be there on another machine. Not gonna happen. So, hope it's an interesting idea for you. Second of all, turns out, I have no idea how I didn't know that before, that you can actually, so you use include, right? And then you do apps, or rather app, and then Spotify. It doesn't work right now because I actually already included that. So let's not. And let's check out. Maybe I had a syntax error of some kind. So app Spotify. Maybe I'm capping actually, but I saw that happen in V1. Maybe the syntax is wrong in how I use it. Essentially, the idea is that you can include specific classes. And matter of fact, you can include specific functions too. That is something that you can do. But if it's just a bunch of functions that are usually used together, and especially for dependencies, you will want to have a class. So you just include that one class and everything within it works and you can use it. So classes are big for that. Now, you see a lot of static before pretty much every declared thing. Looks goofy, and you don't really get what static means in this context. Sure, you watched my video on static variables, so you know what static variables do and how they operate in the context of functions. Cool, you have that knowledge, and that's amazing. Very, very useful. However, for some odd reason, static means a completely different thing in the scope of classes. Not necessarily a completely different thing, but something that you couldn't guess. At least I couldn't. If you could, congratulations. So, I'm going to explain what static means in terms of classes. The class itself versus its instance, and what the fuck all of that means. I'll be clear with you. It's kind of difficult, it's not obvious, and after it you think, now why the hell do I need classes? The answer is you kinda don't. You pretty much just don't. I know functional programming is not, oh, I'm using functions instead of classes, but I'ma just bastardly oversimplify it. Functional programming exists for a reason. Classes are overhyped. And if you think that, well, damn, I don't use classes that much, it's almost like I'm not a good programmer. No, not necessarily. Classes have their place, but not as often as people like them to have a place. So I'm gonna explain how this works. First, you create a class. Let's call it example. Cool. This is a class. Now we're going to write a method. What is a method? I explained that in my... Hold on, where the fuck did I explain that? Give me a second. Yeah, I don't remember where I explained the difference between methods and functions. I think in my function objects video, but I could be wrong. But essentially, a function is, well, a function. You know them. A method is just a function inside of a class, or in HK's case, an object. So, if you define a function inside of a class, it is now called a method. I am sure I'm not the only one that felt like, okay, what the fuck? Programming, you're so weird. Seriously, you had to come up with a new name for the same thing, which barely matters? Like, come on now. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that it's kind of ridiculous. So, let's make this function show something. Because it's difficult to think and talk at the same time. And now, let us call that function. Example, func. Oh my god, he did the YouTuber thing where he showed the incorrect thing first. What? Yeah, basically this doesn't work, and it's kind of strange. Like, why? It's literally there. I took the name and I called the function. Why is there an error? Well, actually, let's look at it. Maybe it's kind of useful. This type of value class has no method named func. It quite clearly does. Well, the thing is, this is not actually in the class. What are you saying, Axel Fubler? If that's even your real name. There are two things, and let me try this out for explaining. Looks good enough to me. This is a class. No, it's a circle. I know, but it's a class. So you write a method into it. But to access that method, you can't just have it from inside. You have to create an instance of that class and call that method from that instance. It's not a good visualization, I recognize that. Essentially, a class is a prototype that you... It's always funny when YouTubers take way too long of a time to draw something when explaining something that doesn't require you drawing a statement. I think that's hilarious, which is a part of why I did it. So you can use this prototype and create an instance of that class. An instance is essentially, yo, I use this recipe, so this is a recipe, to create an actual object from that class. And so this is an object. This is basically food. You took the recipe and you created something from it. Now, using this, say this is a recipe on how to mold a lamp? No, a plate. This is now a plate. And you can use this plate to, for example, how to draw food. You know what? I should have pictures of food so I can do this and like show them. Yeah, basically food, whatever. So you can place it on that plate and use it. You can't put food on a recipe of, to a plate. That's ridiculous. And that's essentially how classes work. Now, to actually use this food, which in this case is the func method, we have to create an object of the class. So, class object, we call example. Well, that's it, essentially. You could explicitly call it like that to create an object. Same way with GUIs, arrays, actually, if you didn't know. So, educate test. Yeah, I do have two. Perfect. Usually, to create an array, you do this. And it's the usual method. Turns out, you can also use this thing. Nobody does because it's kind of why would we? We have a shorthand for that. And to extrapolate on that, this is the full and proper method. Don't ever use it though, please. But now you know. So we call the class to get a class object, and now we use that class object to call that function. It would be really funny if I failed. It would be hilarious, but I didn't. So now we can actually call it, because this method exists on the prototype of the class. So this is the recipe. We created a... I might be wrong on that. Yeah, basically the class itself is the base. But when we do this, when we get the object, we get the prototype, and we operate on that prototype. This is the default behavior. It's really useful when you want to create an object with a couple of variables inside of it, maybe like width, height, color, age, name, gender, sexuality, whatever else. You somehow interact with all of these parameters in a far more clean manner, and then discard that object because we did everything we wanted to. However, if it's just a namespace essentially from C#, and not only, I imagine, yeah, if it's just a collection of functions that are somehow related, and you don't deal with variables that much, so by that I mean something like this. If that's not really needed or is constant, then you could make it so you can call this method from the class itself without needing to create a class object. So now we can go back to example and we call func. How will this work? Well, we use static. As you can imagine, static makes sure that something, so usually a variable, in this case a method, is stayed into memory. It is now connected to memory. Once you load it, it is now there. It will be constantly there. In this situation, though, it will constantly be in the class. It will be connected within it. So now you can call it from within. And you don't need to make this second step of creating a class object. Not a necessity anymore. And most things, at least in my project, yeah, I just need to call it. I don't need to interact with it in any way. I mostly don't. So, most things will be static. If you want to create an object, give it parameters, work on it, so basically use multiple functions that will share the same values between each other, then you don't use static. Because you need an object. You need a plate on which you eat. And then you, okay, sure, throw out the plate like an aristocrat and get a new one, because now you're eating dessert. And using the same plate for meat and dessert is honestly kind of sad. So please don't. This is more or less the explanation for how this works in classes. Now you can start using classes somewhat, because it's a way to group things together in a more tight and nice way. I want to come clean. The video on classes has been an idea since a really long time ago for my main channel, where I script my videos and put a lot of effort in. And I'm fucking terrified of making a video on classes, because for sure I'm going to forget a lot of things. I didn't even cover most of it. Well, at least to me, that's most of what I need to know about classes. And same thing for you, probably. But in my main channel video, I would have to think of fucking everything that I need to explain, more or less. Even in 2 videos, I'm terrified that I'm gonna forget something. And then what do I need to do? To update the video? To delete the last one and create a new one? Because I forgot one small thing? Ugh, that's terrifying. But on my second channel, I can just create a video, when I think of it, I mean, I just got the idea 5 minutes ago. I was feeling kind of bad, and I'm like, damn, I want to create another video to feel better. I explained this thing, and when another comes to mind that I want to explain about classes, boom, another video, and here you go. So no wonder why I upload so much more on the second channel than I do in the main channel. I might end up not scripting at all in the future, but who knows? This is just a small update about the two channels and what I feel, in case someone's interested. So, I hope you learned something today. Leave a like if you did, and leave a comment if you have questions about classes, because honestly, I do too. And I do know some things about classes, so I'll try my best to explain those to you. So feel free to ask away and subscribe, because I most definitely have more content on the second channel, and it's not that bad comparatively. I mean, it's pretty bad comparatively, but kind of proud of it. So subscribe if you want to not miss new content. It goes out every 3 days, at least for now, when I have ideas. So every third day, you'll have a new video coming out on this channel. Alright, thank you for watching, and goodbye.